Um, First of all, my name is Jim McDaniel, college class of 1968. And as a prelude to this morning's panel discussion, we're going to have the benefit of an overview of the newly launched class council program from the Dean of the College, John Boyer. There are a great many things that one could say about Dean Boyer, whose substantial achievements as dean are well known by now. I think it's fair to say that during the course of his tenure, Dean Boyer has very significantly transformed and rebuilt the college, preserving, in my view at least, its historical strengths while having the wisdom and the courage to recognize and address some of its historical weaknesses. Over the past several years that I've been an active alumnus and supporter of the college, I've come to have the deepest respect and admiration for Dean Boyer. But rather than express my own views, I thought I'd pass along some extraordinary observations that I recently heard from an important source. I had the pleasure to have dinner with just about 3 weeks ago with two undergraduate students, both sons of friends of mine, and one's a third-year student in college. One was an incoming student. The third-year student was on what we used to call the O board. I don't know whether it's still called it, but he was an orientation volunteer and telling the younger guy. And first of all, the intelligence and the intellectual curiosity and liveliness of these guys is in itself a testimony to the health and strength of the college today. But in the course of the conversation, Dean Boyer's name came up, not raised by me, but the O board guy said, and speaking to the incoming student, you have to meet Dean Boyer. He's just this amazing person. He said, and the most amazing thing about Dean Boyer is that he really understands what it's like to be a student here now. And I thought that was a tremendous compliment for a dean. In my day, deans were not held in high repute, and administrators generally. And I think Dean Boyer enjoys a very well-deserved reputation among his various constituencies. So I will now turn it over to Dean Boyer to let him tell us how the class councils, in his view, can be used to further the many projects that he has in mind for the college. John?
Thank you, Jim. Jim is a incredibly inspirational volunteer, and I had the pleasure and privilege of riding with him on one of these big clunky limousines that we would go around visiting reunion classes. He has the stamina of a professional campaigner, and I really I appreciate that. You get to the 7th or 8th reunion class, and as you get into them, we go from the older to the younger. Of course, the younger are the noisiest, which is they should be. Otherwise, then it means they're not having a good time. I think it's something of a miracle we both have our hearing. But anyway, I thought I would just come and tell you a little bit about why I think this new initiative is important. I can't claim that it was my initiative, although I've embraced it, and I think it's something that I hope we'll be able to both start and then make work and make last. It's kind of Robert Hutchins, former president, used to say that it's easy to start things. The difficult thing is to make them work and make them last. Today is a busy day for everybody, and I think it's really wonderful to come into the law school and see so many alums, especially so many alums from a wide variety of classes, coming back to kind of strategize as to how to strengthen both the experience of the alumni and also to help the university and college more generally. I have to leave shortly from this meeting to go and lead our annual Southside Bike Tour, which we take about 120 students all over the South Side and show them a bunch of stuff. And the whole idea of that is not just to show them the South Side, but also to kind of bring them together as a small kind of micro community for a day, and then hope that they, in turn, will then create other micro communities of cyclists and bikers who will then take their relatives, friends on their tours of the South Side. The idea is to empower people and to make them, to give them a sense of Chicago as if it's not their hometown, and for most of them it's not, it's going to be their new hometown, and to break down the barriers that have traditionally seemingly invisible barriers, but all the more intractable barriers that lay between the university and the broader city. And then after that, we're going to have a big party over, where are we? I guess that way, at 4 o'clock, and I think everybody's invited, right?
Yep.
With lots of cake and so forth to celebrate the new residence hall. And that's also an exercise really in the development of community, because we know that really one of the, it seems to me, one of the untold stories, or not often enough told stories, of the success of the college has been our residential system, and we need to celebrate that more, we need to highlight it more, and we need to support it more with better facilities. And the idea of this new hall, which is really quite stunning, it was built as a hall. It wasn't some kind of old building, kind of, as a retread, where the university decided to use some undergraduates as a kind of forward positioning force to defend part of the neighborhood, rather a building built for the purpose of encouraging community among our students and support among our students. And I think it's a brilliant job. I think the architects did a brilliant job. I think what you're here today to talk about is also nurturing and engendering communities that will take place in various ways and various shapes, probably in some ways that we can't even predict or imagine today, and which will probably also be different one from another depending upon the personalities and leaders who come forward. I think the general idea is one that I really tried to raise in a publication I wrote a number of years ago, I think 4 years ago, on the history of the relationship of the university to its alumni over time. This was one of these monographs that I did. I usually do every summer, or I have done every summer. And the one on the alumni started out as a monograph on the history of fundraising, because I was interested. We were in the middle of the campaign and trying to figure out, where have we, how successful have we been or not. It turns out we were not very successful, and then that led me then to begin to think about the relationship of the university to its alumni, because for most universities, this one included your alumni or your primary donor base. That was true in 1923 when they had the first campaign for the university. It was true, the campaign that we had last year. And the story that came forward from the records and from the written testimony, and also the older alumni whom I interviewed for the project, was one of I would say, a kind of inconsistent set of relationships. The university basically not really understanding fully that the alumni were equal partners and equal members of the university. For a variety of reasons, the university got into the habit of talking about itself, really not so much during Harper's era, but during the 30s and onward, as if the faculty, and especially the senior tenure faculty, owned the university. It was theirs as some kind of private preserve, like a condominium you would own, or a set of luxury objects you would own. You might share it with other people. You might let them see it. You might invite them over to dinner and let them look at it for a few minutes, and then you put it away until you invited the next people over. And so there was this lack of consistency, but also a lack of imagination, it seemed to me. And that over time, this really did hurt the university. And so I wrote that little book. It was fairly controversial at the time, and it was meant to provoke. And I think it's probably had something of an impact in the last 4 or 5 years. I think you're here today to help create a different history going forward, so that 100 years from now, someone writing the history of the alumni of the university and their relationship to the institution will fashion a very different story, a story of intense engagement, a story of strong support for students while they're here, and then a kind of natural process by which students become alumni and continue to relate to each other, support the university, support each other and help the university, not only financially, which is important, but also much more in terms of providing a fabric of memory and a fabric of loyalty and a fabric of vocality, so that we have many voices out there talking about the place, understanding the place. Universities are not easy things to explain to the American public. They're not easy things to explain to 17-year-old high school seniors trying to figure out where they should go to college, or there are very nervous parents who are apprehensive about, A, can I get my student into the right college, and then B, how am I going to pay for it? And see what's going to happen to my child once they go there. Are they going to succeed? What will happen to them? These are a whole series of discursive and rhetorical interventions that are terribly important, because universities are communities. They're not lone transactions. The image of the scholar as some kind of privatgelehrt, of someone standing and sitting in his or her study, surrounded by tomes, with the candle burning slowly, and the cobwebs over the windows. This is a completely wrong, irrelevant notion, even what scholarship is. Scholarship today is intensely interactive. It's intensely communitarian. People don't do research in isolation anymore. In the sciences and social sciences, even the humanities. Certainly the Art Center, which we're about to break ground on, which will be another wonderful scene of tremendous number of small micro communities. One doesn't do the arts in isolation, so that the universities are bundles of micro communities of all kinds, and to the extent that they prosper and survive, not just survive, but prosper and flourish, it seems to me the more of these communities we have, the better. Now, the idea of the councils is, I take it, that we're inviting people to use a couple of things that the university never used before. Firstly, class consciousness, and I don't mean that in a Marxist sense. Although I have to say that Marx's notion that classes should kind of unite and do things is not a bad idea. It's a question of what you do once you unite. And since I've always believed that revolutions have to break a few eggs and so forth, to the extent that the councils begin to act in a very positive and active way, I think is a good thing. I can imagine a number of things that each class council can do, and I would be happy to kind of codify those. But I think that right now this is still a work in progress, and I think it really will work best if it kind of comes from the ground up, and it solidifies, and if the leaders, which is you, or who are you in the room, and those who join you, begin to define the agendas that you want. I've been told by the development offices that they're serious about this, and I think that's the first thing to say. This is not just some scheme somebody came up with and said, let's just try this, and then next week we'll do something else, because that's ridiculous. If you're going to start something, you have to stay with it and make it work, nurture it, and make it work every year so that the fourth and fifth year are better than the first and second year. I mean, that's the real objective, not just to start something. And I can imagine a series of communities, and here obviously the internet is tremendously valuable, and all of the new technology that goes with it, where we have younger alumni staying in touch with each other, both for purposes of friendship and solidarity, but also career advice, learning about the university, in a sense having the kind of intense interaction that one has at a reunion, only having it each year. I can imagine as one gets older and one's life becomes more complicated, because as you get older, the archaeological levels get higher and deeper and thicker, that one begins to think about supporting the university financially, and also about talking about the university as an educational project to one's friends, explaining it, trying to recruit students. I think we have a new dean of admissions and a great team. We're very, I think we've done a tremendous job in admissions over the last 10 years, but there's still far too many people in this country who don't understand the university, who confuse us with the University of Illinois Chicago. That still happens, by the way. It does happen. It's unfortunate. I hear this all the time from younger alumni. People, where did you go to school? Like, what is this? This is there was just a rating published in the Times Educational Supplement yesterday. We're now ranked, as far as you take these things seriously, it's number 7 in the world. We went up 1 point. I mean, just think about that. It's a reputable ranking, and these things have some plausibility. That of all the 500, 600 research universities in the world, we're not only in the top 10, but we're 7, and we're probably going to move up. I mean, isn't that kind of institution worth talking about and worth understanding and worth cultivating? So it seems to be part of the work of the councils is also to be a voice for the university to, not only a voice of memory, but, well, it was like that when I was there, and now they've changed it. Well, that's okay, because universities should change, but to understand not only what it was like when you were here, but also to understand what it's like today, and to be able to talk about it and to explain that to the wider world. So I imagine that there will be a series of benchmarks, a series of best practices having to do with communications, having to do with organizing reunions, having to do with trying to get more externships and more internships for our kids. We have a huge number of programs now where we're trying to really, in a sense, we've kind of invented the whole idea of college internships. There was this article in the New York Times about a month ago, which is astonishing. There are these organizations now that if you pay $7,000 or $8,000 to an organization, they'll get your kid an internship at some, and I can say, well, many of our families don't have $7,000 or $8,000 laying around to get their daughter or son an internship, and many of them wouldn't know how to do it if they had. So what we did 5-6 years ago with the support of Bill Michael and Jim McDaniel, a whole bunch of other people, many of whom may be in this room, is that we decided we're going to create our own internships, and we're going to pay for them. So it's going to be merit-based. It's not going to be timocratic. It's not going to be wealth-based. But we need more of those internships, and we need a lot more of them. We had about 200 this summer. I think 200 some. I'd like to double that in the next couple of years, and the councils can help with that. So there are a series of pragmatic things you can do. And there are also questions that you may have about the university, because this is a dialogic process, and I think that the more we stay in touch with you seriously, the more ammunition you're going to have to talk about the university, to sell it to young people, and perhaps to just educate the American public more about why these institutions are so important. So I think I want to stop now, and I'm going to turn it back to Jim. I wish you good luck today, but I wish you good luck 6 months, and a year from now, and 2 years from now, because if we're going to start this, we got to take it seriously. We've got to make it work for the long run. Otherwise, we shouldn't do it. But I have great confidence that the development and alumni people are very serious about this, and they want to help you, and they would like you to work hard to help the university. So thank you very much.
And by the way, thank you all for attending. We very much appreciate your presence here and your contributions, past, present, and future, to the college. First order of business, I think, is to, well, actually, the staff suggested that I say a few words about my own experience as a volunteer. I'll do that, but very briefly. I first became involved really as an alumnus, I think probably around my 20th reunion. I don't recommend that you wait that long. But that was sort of characteristic, I think, of my era in the college. I first became active, actually, by serving on a reunion committee, and that's actually the way that I think a great many alums get involved as volunteers. And then after I'd done that a couple of times, I co-chaired the gift committee one year, and then I was asked to chair, I think it was called, I can't even remember the title now, but it was my role was to coordinate reunion among all the classes. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I'm currently serving and have been for the past, I think I'm in my 4th year now on the College Visiting Committee. And during the past year, I was asked to co-chair a task force on the class council program that produced a report which gave rise to the program that we're going to talk about today. And it's now my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists. And my understanding of how this panel was chosen is that each of these people here at the table have actually done something about the class council program rather than just talk about it, which is mostly what I've done and write. But they've actually been working to organize their classes. The first is alphabetically George and Nisi. George is a 2006 graduate of the college with an SB in chemistry and former editor-in-chief of the Chicago Maroon. He currently lives in Cleveland, where he's a medical student at Case Western Reserve. Deborah, or Deb Ayuk, AB 05. Deborah is a 2005 graduate of the college with an AB in International Studies and Latin American Studies and a former captain of the Maroon swim team. She currently lives in Gainesville, Florida, where she's a student at the University of Florida, Levin College of Law. Neil Kawashima is a 1993 graduate of the college where he concentrated in fundamentals, issues, and texts. He's a partner at the firm McDermott, Will & Emery, and he lives in Chicago. And Tim Richards, to my right, graduated from the college in 2007 with an AB in International Studies. He lives in Chicago and works for the Northern Trust Company as a credit analyst. So I'd like first to let the panelists just tell us how you came to be involved in organizing your class council, where you are in the process, and what the experience has been like thus far. And since it's a small group here, I hope we can, after hearing these statements from each of our panelists and have a little introduction from their point of view, then we can open it up and have a wider discussion. So, George, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So, my name is George Nisi, and class of 2006. I just kind of background. So, my experience with alumni and doing this kind of work, this volunteering work, started for the most part with the Senior Class Gift Committee. We had a very vibrant campaign my year, and after that, it kind of rolled into the reunion committees, and so it was kind of natural to take on this role for class council. I thought that the idea of it fit well with what I liked about the reunion committees, and also filled the holes that I saw in the reunion committees. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So, and I should note that everything I say here is also should be given credit to Ben Walsh, who's my co-chair, who's been very involved, who's a chair of the Senior Class Gift Committee and is now co-chairing this with me. So we set up our class council in the spring, last spring, leading up to what would have been our third reunion. And we have about 15 to 20 people. We have a fairly active council. We talk once or twice, once a month, once every 2 months. So what I'd like to do is kind of tell you what I thought about kind of as the overarching goals for our specific class council, and then what our kind of main initiative is going into this new fiscal year. So I mentioned what I liked about reunion committees, where it was kind of alumni leadership and things like that. What I thought were the holes were that they were, this mad rush 3 months up to the reunion and then kind of dissipated immediately afterwards. And so what I saw as the role of the class council was more continuity in alumni leadership. So something that would stretch throughout the year, that could morph into reunion committees or spawn reunion committees when necessary, but that is a more continuous structure for alumni leadership. And so that was kind of how I viewed it, and the main hole that I saw in the reunion structure that this plugged. And in terms of the kind of the underlying goal of the class council, we had this connecting alumni, fiscally, socially, professionally, whatever the list was. So we took it to mean, instead of specific programming that we were going to do, we took our first goal to make to kind of lay the foundation for having kind of a bedrock, a network with which to work off of for those kind of events in the future. So our main focus, our main kind of first initiative for this new fiscal year is what we're calling the regional alumni networks. And I liked Dean Boyer's reference to micro communities, which is kind of what we're trying to create. So what we've done is we've given each member of the class council a regional assignment throughout the country. We're trying to cover as many major city areas as possible, and to kind of give them responsibility for that region for our class. And so their job right now, and we've already kind of sent out our assignments and people are in the process of doing this, is to get in touch with everyone within their region, kind of explain to them what this new emphasis is on kind of continuous alumni leadership, make sure the end goal is to make sure that everyone knows everyone else around them. So if you move to a new job in a new city, you can plug into that network and you know who's around. And from having kind of that vibrant network set up, that will spawn later on, fundraising events, social events, professional networking, things like that. So we've just started this. We've made our first assignments. We have about 12 different regions assigned so far. With everyone's already been given the list of people in the area and are starting to make their outreach. And so that's kind of our first initiative. And then I just want to address one or two things, which are the challenges I've seen so far with the class council structure, which is that obviously the division by class is convenient. It works. Dean Boyer mentioned that, but it is somewhat artificial. People weren't friends with just people in their own class. They were friends with a couple classes above and below, and so there is some artificiality to it, and that's kind of something we just have to recognize. And the second is that our class council looks remarkably like our senior class gift committee, which is to say that it's very easy to start preaching to the choir. It's the same people who want to get involved, who you seem to keep contacting, and so we're kind of making a conscious effort to make sure that we don't fall into that trap of just kind of talking amongst ourselves. It's easy to have great conversations about the University of Chicago among people who love volunteering for the university, but we're trying to kind of broaden our scope. So that's my initial summary of our activities so far.
Thanks, George. Deb?
I got involved volunteering with my first reunion committee, and after our first reunion, we had a great time with the committee and with reunion, and we decided we wanted to come back for the second year, and we did. And it wasn't actually called a second reunion. I think it was a second year celebration. And I know that the class of 2006 did that the following year. So when we heard about the class councils program, we were very excited because now we can actually come back every year and we can stay connected during the in-between years. And we started last year. We had a class. I think our class council was about 12 people, and I think we also got settled around the beginning of the year in January, February. We had a few activities last year. One of the things we did was we sent out personalized thank you notes to everybody in our class who gave, as opposed to just getting that letter that you get in the mail. Another initiative that we have been working on, and we've continued to work on it now this year with our fifth year reunion, is we're trying to reach out and find the lost alumni to make sure that we keep our class up to date with all of our information for the class. We've kind of designated liaisons within the class council to do different things. So we have somebody who takes care of the lost alumni, and we have somebody else who update as far as communications. We set up a Facebook page for our class, and we keep it constantly updated with events for the class and with our class goals for the year and how we've been doing with that. And now we also have someone working with careers, so we want to try to figure out different things and different ways to help our class network and work with CAPS to do some career events. What I really like about the class council is that it was a nice shift into the fifth year reunion committee this year. We had everyone in the class council is on the committee, and then we have maybe another 20 new members in the committee who are actually new. Weren't around for our first year, and so we're really excited about that. And one thing that we're trying to work on with the committee and continue to work with the class council is to kind of reach out to different affinity groups and make sure that we have someone from different affinity groups when they were in the college, in the class council and in the committee, so that we can actually reach out to as much of our class as we can. That's what we're doing.
Thanks, Deb. Neil?
Good morning. I'm Neil Kawashima. I'm a member of the class of 1993. So our class council began last spring, right on the heels of our 15th reunion, and so it was a convenient time to start our council. It was the idea was pitched to the members of our class as a way of continuing the momentum coming off of a fairly successful 15th reunion. Successful in terms of participation and in terms of the gift. And this idea was met with, I think, a great deal of enthusiasm, but also questioning. I mean, what's the point of this? What are we going to do? And so we began this activity with the understanding that there were going to necessarily be missteps and false starts. We were one of the first classes to begin this program, and we were happy to do it because, again, coming off of the reunion, we have a fairly strong, fairly cohesive class, so we figured we could, the members who were involved, about a dozen of us, take the risk, and even if there were some false starts or missteps, that it wouldn't really have a too detrimental effect on the class and our cohesiveness and our 20th reunion. So we began with that understanding. This was a way for us to continue the momentum during the off-reunion years in anticipation for the next reunion, but also as a way to keep in contact with each other and to more actively participate in the college affairs. So with that beginning, we've had several calls among the class, and I think the activity that we are most excited about and probably most proud of to date is the notion of adopting a class. And so we're the class of 1993, and we decided to adopt the class was it 2014, 13? So our 20th reunion class, which is scary for a number of reasons. And so my colleagues here on the panel, it's difficult for them to adopt a class because they're so they're not that many years since graduation. But the more senior your class is, the more likely you'll be able to adopt a class. And the notion of that is, or the benefit of that, I think, is two-way. Like all volunteerism, the volunteer gets perhaps as much or more out of the experience than the people they're trying to help. In our case, for the class, we found this as a perfect mechanism to stay in touch with the college, to get to know current students, and to perhaps lend a hand in terms of the students' career development advice and whatnot. And for the student in university, it's an open channel to our class. So I thought this was a mutually beneficial arrangement. So far, we've begun this program by introducing ourselves to the class of 2013. That was done at orientation week by one of the council members, Thurston Bailey, and we've essentially begun to open communications with this class. Now, particularly in light of the economy and I think how much more advanced career placement is in the college compared to when I was in the college, this might be very useful going forward as the students progress their careers here at the college, particularly as mentioned, internships, career advice. Just the other day, one of our council members emailed me and asked me my advice about, he's a professor down south, and he asked what kind of advice should he give his students who want to go to law school. And I told him, well, tell them not to go, one, but two, that trying to get a job as a paralegal or legal assistant. That might be helpful, but first and foremost, the student should talk to lawyers, and as many different types of lawyers as they can meet to find out what they do and whether this is something that the student would be interested in. Well, this council provides a perfect opportunity not only to speak to lawyers, but to doctors or people in business and so forth. So hopefully this is the beginning, in our view, of a strong relationship with the class of 2013, and then other activities for the benefit of the college and for the benefit of our alumni.
Thanks, Neil. Before we open it up to a broader discussion, I do want to point out that.
We have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Probably skip for a reason.
Yeah.
Like a side note right there.
Tim.
Yeah. I'll keep it brief.
I apologize.
We want to keep this a forum.
No. You've got plenty of time.
Sure about that. Anyways, before we go to the Q&A, so I'm the youngest person up here. I'm an 07 grad, so luckily for us, our class is like our memory of us of the school are a little bit more familiar than most people up here, which is good and the bad. It kind of skews the purpose of what we do, though, because being the youngest class out, we don't really have the opportunities to really make the decisions like Metcalfs or externships, things of that nature. We don't really have that kind of power in the workforce yet. But kind of giving you the brief background of my class, as I see some of us here. My class is, I benefit from this a lot because my class I think of as like a giant Venn diagram. There's numerous ones of us that are all kind of like connecting these like weird social circles, but they all overlap. And so you get this kind of this plague of rabid enthusiasm for the school that just spreads across the board. So all the way you can kind of like hop between these different social groups and get people like invigorated, which works out really well, makes my job pretty easy. But going off of that idea of, we're young, our kind of purpose of our class council is a little bit different than, say, like 93. Instead of adopting a class, we're thinking, well, what can we really do to, invigorate our classmates and keep them interested so that, 15 years from now, they will want to adopt a class. And so that kind of pushes our skew more so as kind of like donating, and then the big focus would be Alumni Weekend and then the party that we're going to throw. So that's kind of where we're at this point, is just thinking, wow, what type of social events can we create to keep people enthusiastic across the board? And that's where we're at, so.
Thanks, Tim, and my apologies. I wouldn't want to have missed that particular take on class councils. I did also want to just point out that we do have a couple of staff folk who are assigned to assist and answer questions, particularly in this session, and I guess generally Ruth Mayberg-Stein and Christopher Phillips are back there in the corner. If you raise your hand so people can see who you are. If you have unanswered questions when we finish this session, please feel free to address them to those folks. I think you probably have picked up the drift here that the underlying purpose of the class councils is really to maintain continuity of involvement of classes as a class between reunion years, and both for the benefit of members of the class as well as for obviously our principal purpose of supporting the activities of the college. Were the class council volunteer job descriptions, were those passed out to the group? Okay.
I think one of the reasons was everyone should have received a USB memory stick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we are encouraged to print out less copies. We're actively encouraged to make this a very green volunteer fair.
Okay,
So
that's fine. Let me just go through this, because there were some interesting there are some suggestions that may stimulate thought and activities. The volunteer activities, I'll just, without giving descriptions, the ones that were listed were a class website, class e-newsletter, events, actual physical present social events, fundraising, call nights to rehearse for fundraising, thank you notes for giving, locating lost classmates, putting together affinity lists of people who were associated with one particular organization or another while you were within your class while you were at the college. Alumni weekend, of course, planning for the next alumni reunion year, or as Deb pointed out, maybe organizing some attendance at alumni weekend in between class years, which, you know, you're perfectly welcome and it's encouraged to do that. You don't have to wait 5 years to come back. If you want to be on campus and participate in alumni weekend events, it's open for you to do it. Alumni Board of Governors externships, and then the last category is get creative. So with that, I'd like to just open for question and discussion that can be addressed to anyone. Philip Caruso.
I'm Phil Caruso, yes. I'm class of 07 and I live in Boston now. And my question is, I guess, for everyone on the panel, but we just hosted Phoenix Fest in Boston. It was a successful event for young alumni. We brought a lot of people who we didn't even know were in Boston out to the event. And one of the troubles that we had in organizing the event was when we originally received our list of young alumni who were in Boston, I found that maybe half of the people on the list were actually in Boston and another half had moved on. And then, like I said, we had a whole wave of attendees who we didn't even know were in the city. And so my question for the panelists would be, what mechanisms have you found to sort of keep the data that you have on alumni and their locations as fresh as possible? I mean, I think for young alumni, because they move around so much, that's going to be sort of a continuing problem. But for Neil and for Jim, how have you best maintained understanding of where your classmates are?
The question is, how have we maintained, what ways have people found to maintain current class lists? Neil, do you have any thoughts?
I mean, this is somewhat embarrassing because I'm used to being one of the youngest members of the panel, and now I'm not anymore. But I'll tell you, when Phoenix Fest began, and that was 15 years ago or so, it was pretty primitive in the sense of paper lists. Email was being used, not as much as it is today, and it was sort of a clumsy system of word of mouth and out of date lists. Now our class uses things like Facebook, and I think the alumni directory that the university maintains is pretty sophisticated if you go onto it, but you still need people to update that information. And so the point I'm trying to make is, I think word of mouth is still much better than any of these technological advances. Facebook's great, and the directory is great, but nothing compares to these. I think one of the panelists was mentioning these circles of different constituencies and the overlap, and then that is trying to identify key people in these groups who know other people and keep in touch with them. And that's what we did really with our reunion in terms of the gift committee. We identified key people that we thought had connections with a wider social circle that we could identify in the college, and were more likely, therefore, to keep in touch with each other. And that, I think, worked pretty well. So I think nothing beats the detective work and then the word of mouth, just strategic identification of people.
Thanks. I would think it's effective just to, if you've got an email list, can't you use that to, when something comes back, identify whose information is not current, and as Neil suggests, but is beyond depending on just word of mouth, if you send out an email saying we're trying to get current information for this, 'cause somebody in your class is going to know that person and know where they are, I suspect, and be able to forward it to them. And then I'd like to ask Ruth and Chris, is there a mechanism in place? Can we, once the class has these corrections, can they forward those to the alumni office, and so that you can update your records to maintain the master list?
Absolutely. And that's actually, I mean, to get back to something that Neil said, something that we rely on. Obviously, you know, if one of us were to send an email and it bounces back, then we look at it. But you know, if somebody doesn't update their email address, people aren't actively sending out pings to make sure that email addresses are current. If you get data to us, we can put it in almost instantly. So we definitely rely on, I mean, people's interactions with their classmates and then getting it back to us.
Thanks. The other thing that occurred to me is, I don't know where we are in establishment of class websites, but that is certainly a key part of the planned class council program, and that website is kind of should be a kind of self-actuating way, because if it, to the extent that it's used, class members can check their own information on the class on the class website, I believe. Is that correct? And update it.
I could add something to that. So,
Sure.
I mean, it's clearly like an ongoing process keeping this up to date, because especially for young alumni, people move a lot for jobs in graduate school and whatnot. So, and we run into this frequently, and any alumni office staff member who works with me knows I relentlessly forward every bounced email to them, so they get them all, and hopefully it is updated. But when we outreach and call people, we always ask them, to give us any updated information they have. And we also ask them who else lives anywhere near them that they know about, and make sure we have them on their list. So it's there's no kind of perfect way to do it, but that's how we've kind of started doing it. So as part of our regional assignments, every single person that we talk to kind of introduce them to this concept, we always ask them who else is around and make sure that our lists are up to date that way. So that's one way we're doing it.
We actually, when we set up a set of speaking points for our council and for the reunion when they call to ask for gifts, and one of the things that we make sure that you always ask is to make sure that the information is updated. People have gotten married and changed their names, and we also encourage them to go into the directory and update their information, especially because it's completely different now, so you can add a lot more, and you can check the mentoring box if you're willing to mentor. And so we encourage them to do that when we call, when we're reaching out to our class.
At this time, about how many of our classes have a core council started?
I don't know that personally. It's a good question. The question is, how many classes actually have councils started?
At least 4.
They're in varying stages, concentrating on the first 25 years out. There's a couple of classes outside of that pool that have started with class councils. Of that first 25 years, I believe there's 4 that do not have any representation of them. But that includes also quinquennial reunion classes. So of those 25 years, there's, I think, 6 reunion classes in there, and then 19 class councils. 4 of them probably don't have volunteers right now.
And then as a follow-up to that, for classes that are kind of starting at the very beginning right now, while I know it's a real drawback to have that kind of core group that's always involved in everything, for those that are beginning, leveraging the kind of information as far as who's attending here today could be really useful to classes that are getting started. I'm not sure if that's something that could be shared.
I'm really glad, sorry to interrupt, but I'm really glad you said that. There are, in a couple locations, sign-in sheets. So basically, we have the data for who RSVP'd for this session, and if you could put your name, your class year, and then, it's probably going to be the college, but if you have a secondary degree, maybe the name of the school or division, And if we could get everyone to sign in, I think, yeah, that would be great. And we can provide, if you want, we can provide that data back out to you. So.
Question for you.
Yep. Sorry.
I have a question for everyone up there. How do you plan to manage volunteer involvement? Like, I know we set goals for fundraising and set goals for outreach, but have we thought about maybe setting goals for, getting people to events or maybe helping with caps? I know, Deb, you said you designate people on your council to kind of manage certain volunteer aspects. How does that work?
Well, we don't really. That's pretty interesting. I hadn't thought about doing anything like that. One of the things we did talk about last year was we have a lot of Chicago area class members, and so and several of them on our class council, and we were planning different events for our class and then the classes around us for in the Chicago area because there hadn't been a few, but I'm not really sure. I like the idea of designating different things within the council so that everybody gets a little more involved, so that all you do is join in the conference calls and then call out, but everyone has a small role and that keeps you involved. But that's about as much as we've done.
The question was goal setting, right? Whether that's a useful tool. Has anybody else had any experience with that?
Yeah, we have a little bit. So what we focus mostly on is just setting up numbers for like METCAPs for externships, and then also for internships as well. So the goal is, first year out, we're like, all right, let's try to get 1, see how that goes. The next year it's like, all right, let's get 2. So there is like stuff like that where we have like a numerical like goal set up for what we're trying to achieve. But I think it really varies across the classes what you can expect for that. So maybe like 10 years out, you're expecting a lot more. You're in a position that you could hire more kids. So
one of the things that in the process of putting together the class council report that we observed was that the more recent classes are really into competitive stuff and goals, and it's a tremendous. When I was in the college, competition was bad, but there was the '60s. But now it seems to be really good, and a lot of people get charged up over that and want to do better than another class. So that's probably a pretty good. It's probably a pretty good suggestion. It's probably a pretty good tool to motivate people, and hopefully these class council websites will be. People will be able to report what they're doing and sort of inspire other people to do the same thing, only better. I'm sorry, Neil. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, our class council, I think maybe because the people on the council have enough competition in their daily professional lives, it's really been kind of like a communal spirit almost. I mean, we've talked about expanding the council itself, goals in terms of members. It's like, well, let's not try to push it too far, too quickly. Let's get some momentum and then try to reach out and get a few more members. Just the other week, we had a call like, well, should we have some kind of a hierarchy, a chairperson, or something? And like, no, we don't want anything like that. We just want to work with Ruth and do it in this sort of communal way. Now, we have an advantage in terms of volunteer goal setting because a member of our council works at the college in alumni affairs, and so we have this sort of, I think Maureen's probably a de facto head of this sort of volunteerism within the college, and so we have that advantage. And so I see your point that maybe there should be some people naturally gravitate towards certain types of activities, fundraising or volunteering and so forth. But with respect to our class, it just sort of naturally gelled that way. It's never been discussed really.
Thanks, Neil. Someone over here had a question. I'm sorry, I can't read your name tag.
Kathleen Abbott. Hi, I'm actually the class correspondent for my class, and I've been on regional boards, and I'm actually active in one of the big affinity groups because I was in sports. And my question is after doing class news, it is sort of arbitrary the year you graduated, but location of where you're living and what your interests were are also, I think, really important. So my question is a lot of what you guys are doing sounds a lot like what we do in the San Francisco, regional board. What relationship do you have with them? Are you taking advantage and are you working with them, or is it overlapping?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing we talked about initially was that we definitely didn't want to add inefficiency to the alumni structure. So we did not want to do something that was already in place and didn't want to make the kind of alumni structure any more complicated. And the regional clubs were something that we discussed and how they would interact with class councils and kind of what the different roles were. And our general kind of consensus was that in a lot of places, the classes that are most recently out of the college aren't involved too much in regional clubs. That's the types of events kind of serve classes that are a little further out. And I know that kind of from my experience in a few different regional areas now. And so our idea was to kind of fill somewhat of a hole, at least for the young alumni, and not necessarily step on the toes of anything that the regional clubs were doing. And part of our kind of regional outreach is to have kind of better connection to the regional clubs that do exist. So we're trying to make sure we work with them, don't repeat anything they're doing, don't step on their toes, and fill any holes that exist. So that's part of that, I guess, partial answer.
When that same question came up in the on the task force, I think the answer that George gave is exactly what we said. Don't get in the way, don't compete, fit in, and.
The thing that's interesting to me is actually that's how I got into volunteering for the university. Is I went to San Francisco, and all the book clubs were like class of 1946, and so I organized the wine tours and the Cubs games. So I guess the difference is I just absorbed into the regional group as opposed to doing something separate. So, and that's why it's interesting that it's sort of two sides of the same coin.
That's great. We're out of time, and I think people need to use the room. But thank you all for attending, and I'm sure you can carry on this discussion in the hallways and elsewhere.
Thank you, Jim.